Today, we're going to be talking about the state of academia because a lot has gone on, a lot of proverbial shit has hit the fan. And I figured we'd talk about it because one, we've spoken with some academics recently, and two, I feel like online education and academia cross paths very, very tightly. Uh, John, do you want to give your quick sort of like rundown on the way that you see academia versus online education, just as like a quick blurb as like where your mind is at, where do you start thinking?
So this is a shifting narrative for me,
Mm.
as I'm realizing as I interact with you and as I interact with Julia. My
And Jeff,
immediate gut reaction, and Jeff. My immediate reaction for a very long time was academia is over here in their own little bubble. They're unapproachable. I can't talk to them because I am but a lowly human being who does not academia. So that was my original take of like, and I'm being dramatic for dramatic effect, but it is a bit like that. It's like they stay here, I stay here. I do not have anything worthwhile to add to the conversation. After the conversation with Julia and Jeff, I realized that's a total load of nonsense and is all in my own head or brain or mind or consciousness
the
or
way you
whatever.
used to think, the
The
way you
way,
used
yeah,
to think.
yeah, the way that I used to think. So
And I think it's the
I'm
way
now,
that a lot of people think at the moment.
yeah, and so where I'm moving now is it's interesting because as I interact with you, who is in the academic world, as we went to Berlin, it was really interesting how this isn't going to sound right, how normal everyone was.
Yes, we are people.
It was nice because it reduced that barrier to entry. I think there is this, I suppose, social opinion that people who are academic are at a whole nother level to people who are not in academia. And by that I mean people who are graduating and masters and etc etc, and they are people who have no social life and they don't do XYZ, and they never have friends. They're just constantly in their work and etc etc.
It's it's funny you say that because I feel like that's, like I say, what a lot of people assume unless they're in academia. And I feel like there are some social standards and social qualifications that aren't true in the
Yeah.
sense that it's not an objective truth, but it's a
Mhm.
subjective experience and expectation from society and what we've put on society, or what society has put on us anyway. And when I look at education as a system in general, this is something obviously for those familiar with the work that I do, this is what I'm trying to bash down and fight against almost. But the education system is old. It did what it needed to do and it does exactly what it's designed to do, but it doesn't mean it's effective. For those that are reading the Substack, I recently published an article, and I'll be publishing another one later this week as well, about elements in academia that are poor. There are poor elements in the way that academia is run. It's not that it's failed you. This was a subscriber post. I watched a video about how school has failed you, but school hasn't failed you. It did exactly what it's designed to do. It just wasn't effective at teaching you in the environment that you wanted to go into, or the career that you wanted to go into, or it didn't help you in a way that was more effective than helping someone else. But again, that is so subjective as to failing. So instead of looking at school as failing you or succeeding you, it was less effective for you than someone else.
Yeah.
So the question then becomes, how do you make school effective? And if you replace how do you make school effective with how do you make education effective, well, now we're looking no longer at a school system of formal education, but we're now looking at society and how society moves each individual moving forwards. So how do you teach a child at home? How do you teach a child at sports, arts and crafts? All of those sorts of things. How do you help those people learn? How do we teach in society? And social media is that. Social
Yeah.
media is education. So how do we make social media effective for education? And that would be my question to any educator inside of school, outside of school, any adult, any parent, any child in general, because children learn on social media. And where
Mhm.
academia comes into this, and where the recent scandals come into this, is academia is not effective at doing education. And the reason I say that is a bit of a debrief. Harvard. there was a researcher at Harvard, professor, right? She was a professor in the business school at Harvard, and over 10 years, roughly, she was publishing papers. And inside of academia, there's a publish or perish motto, as it were, because if you don't publish papers, you lose your job. So you publish or you perish. You need to publish papers. And what she was doing was faking data. Whether it was her, whether it was other authors, whether it was other people associated with the papers, no one knows for sure. But there was a blog post, or 4 blog posts, that went up from 3 independent researchers that said, we think this person is faking data inside of these 4 studies. 3 of them have been retracted. 1 of them is up for retraction. But at the end of the day, she's been accused of faking data. Now, this went out on a video recently, and she then sued. She put in a defamation lawsuit against Harvard Business School, because they put her on administrative leave, so she doesn't earn money. That's like $1 million a year, by the way, her salary, which is kind of insane. So we've got this person that's been accused of faking data, and then she has put out this defamation lawsuit for $25 million. So she's suing Harvard Business School for putting her on administrative leave, and suing the 3 academics, the independent academics that put out these blog posts about her. Now, they didn't accuse her. All they did is laid out the evidence and said, this is very suspicious. And she's sued them for various reasons. I did a short about this, so it's on the What I'm Learning YouTube channel. It's in a short if you want to get a 40-second debrief of this. It's also on my TikTok. But hey, but there's that one. Which, what are your initial reactions to that?
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
Yep. And so a book deal has been paused as well. So the 25 million is related to her personal figure and her research and everything that comes with it, because it says defamation lawsuit. So it's quite big, and some of the claims that she's making in the lawsuit documents like 100 pages long. But she does go into various things. One of them, which stuck out to me, was gender discrimination. She's accused the blog of being gender discriminative because the 3 guys are targeting a female. And I'm like, okay, but when you look at the data and what they're arguing, they have good points. Whether you're male, female, or identify in another way, it doesn't matter, because the data that they're showing, the objective data, is questionable, which is what they're doing. They're questioning it. And there are other people that have done this all over the place. And for those familiar in academia, there's a website called Research Watch, which is a newsletter as well, and I subscribe to that. And these sorts of things happen daily, not to this extent, but this sort of retraction of data and people being fired or people resigning positions happens fairly regularly. And the other one with Stanford, basically the person right at the top of Stanford University has resigned because an 18-year-old went into the research and said, that looks photoshopped. And this person right at the top of Stanford was then investigated, and instead of being fired, they just resigned their position. So instead of being at the top of Stanford University, they resigned because of this 18-year-old's research into his work. It wasn't just him, it was the rest of the Stanford Journal thing, and he got another professional fake researcher person to investigate, and they found that these images were manipulated. So these are 2 really high-profile cases of scandals inside of academia, and it makes you question, who are these people? Why do we put them on a pedestal?
Yeah.
The biggest question to me is, if we have academia that's being published, and most of it, and you can look at stats on this, most of it is either P hacking, C hacking, or probability hacking. So they're trying to find a way to make something probable to make it publishable. C hacking is citation hacking, so they use other people to cite their work. So, for example, inside of a publisher, you need to go through the peer review process. So let's use me as an example. I have a published study. I am peer reviewing your study, and I say to you, oh, you should reference my work because my work is related to this. And I'm not going to put you through until you've referenced me. Well, you've added a citation on my paper, so my paper citations are more, so popularity goes up. It's kind of like a view almost, and people do that, and then they also have research groups and citation hacking groups where you'll have 100 academics that all cite one paper to boost its H-index reference. So that's a way of manipulating published papers as well. And then you have the peer review process. So some people inside of peer review just go, oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. And you just publish tons of papers. So some of the academics that publish like 100 papers in a year, how are they doing that? I saw a stat, I can't remember the exact number, but an academic had like their name on 500 or 600 different papers in 1 year. And they didn't look at hardly any of them, but their name was on the paper. So they looked like a prolific publisher. And this is the publishing industry, but this is academia.
Because academia is the publishing industry. That the publishing industry is academia.
That's the way I see it. And that is the problem. That is the state of academia we are at. You are not an academic unless you publish academic papers to an academic journal. But that whole publishing industry is so corrupt. There are so many issues with it, so many scandals with it, which means academia, good academia, which I would class as good academia, isn't actually in academia most of the time. which begs the question, those that are doing online education, are they more academic than the actual academics? That sets a dangerous precedent. But that is what I think the public will see.
Yeah.
I think the public, I mean, you've seen in America, they don't trust experts. They don't trust the scientists. Obviously, COVID is the most obvious example that comes to mind, or the one that I start thinking of. Because COVID, people didn't trust the scientists, people didn't trust the experts, because there is so much questioning that goes on behind the scenes. But it's not questioning the research, it's not questioning the conversation, it's questioning the publishing industry. Yeah, the publishing industry and the interpretations of the people, not adding nuance to what the scientist is talking about. You see it everywhere. I mean, what's his name? The doctor, the really popular doctor on social media, Dr. Mike, that's the one.
Yeah.
He did a video like 3 months back about TikTok and how TikTok shorts of medics are being shared. And when you look at it at face value, you go, no, that's not right. But that's because of the interpretation the short gives you. When you look at the video in full context, actually what they're saying is objectively correct and subjectively interpreted in a way that would make far more sense because it's been added to nuance. There is context with that. But when you have a tweet, when you have a thread, when you have a reel on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or whatever, context is taken out.
Yeah.
Where do you add the nuance? Where do you add the context? Either long form conversation, but then they're going to get clipped, articles, but people don't want to read it. So where is academia? What makes effective academia online? Thoughts?
It matches my experience because for a very long time, in the business world, it's like, oh, you should get qualifications. You should be a qualified this, a qualified that, get certifications, qualifications, etceteracations. Like you must have them. And then if you can put letters after your name, then you sound good. But then when you look at what they say, you go, well, that's rubbish. And one of the things that I've always experienced for myself was like, oh, I could go into academia, get some letters after my name. That'd be cool. But would it be actually worth it? Or would I end up just going, this is driving me insane, this is dumb, and then just leaving?
I do find it
for so long, a lot of my thoughts, oh, I can't do what Danny does, or like the same things that you do where you look at papers and research, and I can't do research, I can't do that. I'm not an academic. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this type of person that does these type of things. But then as I learned more about the world that you're in, I'm like, oh, I can do it just as much as everyone else. Yeah, what does that sound about? And it's interesting to hear about like how things are a mess. I mean, that sounds like the world at the moment.
Yeah, the thing that worries me is because of the way education is seen with qualifications and certifications and standards and expectations, is we as a society, as a human race, like to be able to go, you are qualified enough to do this, you are qualified enough to do that. But the problem with qualification is it doesn't last. It decays. A qualification decays over time because experience decays over time, and understanding of how to apply things effectively in a situation decays over time as well. So standards are, in my opinion, more useful than certificates and qualification standards that are put in stone. But how do you then uphold standards? And this is where professional development, so CPD, coaching professional development, or PPD, personal and professional development. In medicine, there's professional development as well. It's ongoing learning, it's lifelong learning. That sort of stuff is where I would argue the value is in education. However, that is not ingrained in the way that we teach, because in education, from as soon as you start going into any sort of formal education, whether it be nursery, reception, or whether it is homeschooling, you're doing a qualification, you're doing a standardized test, you're trying to pass something, you're playing a game rather than developing skills, developing experiences. That, unless that changes, the state of the world and the state of humans won't change, because we see things as black and white, as pass and fail, as you can or you can't. But caveat here, most people don't see it like that. Most people see the grey. Most people see that, oh, it depends because this or because that, or yeah, but what about that and what about this? And that is where the arguments come from.
Yeah.
The arguments are in the grey, but the arguments are built on the black and white. Sides are built on black and white. You have the right and the left, the conservative and the Labour. You have the yes or the no's. But it's not a yes or no. It's this person is more yes in this situation because of these things. This person is no in this situation because of these things. When most of the time, from my experience, when you get two people that are polar opposites and you get them in a situation and you add all the caveats and nuance in there, it comes down to one, maybe two fundamental differences in belief, but they understand the other person where they're coming from.
Yeah.
But that's understanding how to critically think in a situation and have arguments with people in a situation without, I would argue, without too much emotional baggage that goes into it, with them being tied to a tribe or one side. But that is academia. Well, I can't. John's just sitting there nodding for the audio listeners.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think it's even just academia. It's just us right now.
When you look all the way back at what academia started as, it started as one person talking in front of other people about ideas.
Mm.
And when you look at politics, that's what politics is. One person talking in front of lots of people about ideas.
Yeah.
So where does the democratic, where does the conversation, where does the what's the words? Sort of like collected consciousness, as it were. Where does that get involved? Social media. And the problem I see is, as a society, we look at pass and fail. We look at what's right and wrong, what's left and right, in tribe, our tribe, and the nuance is lost because we look at sensationalistic things. Why do we look at sensationalistic things? Because that's exciting. Why is that exciting? Because of the way that we view information. If we change the way we view information and change the way we view data from birth and through society, then maybe we change what moves to the top. How do you do that? Massive societal changes, which can't be done by one person. It's got to be done by everyone. How do you do that? No idea. But that's a conversation I would say is worth having.
Yeah.
How do you make online education effective in that sense? Going into the nuances of what that means rather than sitting here and bitching about education. I do want to mention, because it's on the list of things that I want to talk about, the ear situation, the left and right ear situation. When I edit, I can't tell whether it's coming out of the right ear or not because I'm deaf in it. So if it comes only out of your left ear when you're watching on YouTube, I apologize.
Hey, now how he feels.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I hear the world. Yeah, something to do with Zoom. And when I import it into DaVinci sees it as a mono audio track rather than a stereo audio track. I've looked into settings. I'm trying to figure it out, but until I figure it out, I'm going to have to remember to put it into stereo. So I've put it as a task when I'm editing to make sure it's in stereo. So I should remember now.
But the next episode probably won't be in stereo
I
because
edited the
you've already
last
got
two
one.
together, so the next one should be stereo rather than mono.
Right, cool. Yeah.
For audio listeners, you're like, what's going on? Because that's an audio track that's just sent to John, and John just goes straight out for it. Actually, no, it might be in the podcast as well, because it is technically an MOV track from the video export.
I have been having some trouble with like the upload. 1 minute it fails, then the next minute's fine, then it fails, and it's fine, and it fails, and it's fine. It takes multiple attempts to get it to upload. So I hate the new interface on Spotify now. So yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no one likes change.
Yeah.
No one likes change.
Well, I don't mind change provided it does its job.
That's
It's
fair.
not working. It's not
Yeah,
working. But yeah,
actually, no. Before we move on, the state of education. How's the situation with the school going? Because I've been looking into primary education, moving into secondary education, and I've been looking at some of the stats, and a lot of kids don't like the transition, understandably, but they acclimatize quickly.
yeah. It was interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking about Aiden primarily, and like when you were mentioning it's a game, I'm like, it is a game, isn't it? It's a game that you play, and it's not actually what learning is.
You don't get to choose the game either.
And yeah, you don't get to, you are playing a game that you don't have a choice in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of a frame that I'm probably going to use with him and share with him. Because I'm like, play the game, do your best. This isn't learning. This isn't, that's not the totality of learning at all. It is, I don't know whether I'd argue if it is learning. It's a form of learning. It's more social learning than anything else.
What is learning to you?
Yeah, I don't know.
That would be something in your pop.
That's a good question. What is learning to me? I don't have my pop yet. It's been a poppy crazy week. It's in my head, so I need a minute to. I think learning to me is understanding. I hate these words, so I'm gonna work on them. It's kind of like that of understanding of what I perceive. So, like in the environment that I'm in, what understanding do I have based on the information given to me? I think that's what I would say.
Is that learning or perception?
Well, it's perception. It is perception, but they are so intrinsically linked that they're just what I suppose it's my interpretation of that or what information I gather from it. But information is such an annoying word.
Thanks, Gibson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I don't want to tell you mine until you've like explored it a bit, because I
I
don't
suppose
want
it's the gathering of knowledge. But even that word I hate. Once again, thank you, Gibson.
to. Yeah. So what's a more appropriate word to replace knowledge?
I'm not sure. Thinking, that's a sucky word too.
Experiences.
Yeah, there. Yeah, experiences. My experience. Yeah.
So would you say learning is a collection of experiences?
Yeah.
Can you not learn from an experience?
I definitely can learn. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, we are always learning. Like, that is a fact.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I am always learning. It's just a different. Yeah. So even in school, you are in a school educational system, you are learning just not the things you might think you are.
That right there is the point of the words that I chose to use.
Yeah.
Effective learning. What is
Yeah.
effective education? Because you're always learning, because there's always experiences that you can use the information from to guide your experiences moving forwards. So you're always learning, you're always developing skills. However, the practice design that you have in the environment will impact the effectiveness of the learning of a specific skill. If you don't have a specific skill in mind, i.e., you don't have constraints in the environment through practice design, then you're not going to effectively learn the skill quickly or effectively, which to me then again begs that question of what is effective education? Because we're always learning. So school, like I say, doesn't fail. It does what it was built to do. It teaches people, but it teaches people at different rates because it's not effective for some people. So yes, school is a game, but school is a game that has learning experiences in it. How do you, what I would then ask as a student, how do I play the game and have an effective learning experience? Sort of like a sub question of that is, do I want to play the game? Because students that misbehave don't want to play the game. That's why they misbehave. It's not they've got their phone at school, or they have a lower natural intelligence level, or they're just dumb, or they just don't listen, or they have behavior issues. No, they don't want to play the game that you're forcing them to play. That's the problem. The problem isn't them. The problem is what you've put them through. And I know it's a bit sensationalistic, but people could argue that you are torturing children that don't want to be in school. You are forcing them to do something they don't want to do, not giving them the choice to do something they do want to do, and it's actually causing them harm.
Yeah.
Because they are, in the way that they are thinking, being harmed. They are mentally being drained. They are being put into situations that's harming them. How you define harm, how you define pain, obviously, then changes your interpretation of that. But if you would define pain as something pathological, which obviously medical term there, but if it's something pathological, if someone doesn't like school because it stresses them out, causes them frustrations, irritates them to the point where they don't want to do it anymore, well, now we're talking about depression and anxiety and potential suicide. That is certainly painful. And if the school is doing that, then it's pathological, which means it's torture because you're doing it to children over years.
Yeah.
Yes, a little bit of a sensationalistic approach there.
No, but there is a thread through that.
There is logic there.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
is school a form of torture? To some people, you could make the argument.
Yeah.
And not just for students either. When you look at the Ofsted report, what was it, a couple of months ago, with the head teacher that committed suicide because of the Ofsted inadequate rating, it's exactly the same game. You're being rated on a small scale on skills you're developing over time, which doesn't cover enough metrics, in my opinion. And it's causing pathological stress to the person. That is not healthy. That is bad. That is the education system that we're working in. That is where the system needs to change. But how do we change the system? Oh, it's the teachers. No, it's not. Oh, it's the board of directors. No, it's not. Oh, it's the government. No, it's not. Oh, it's the government. No, it's still not. Because the government acts on the society. Society? On the society. Yeah, on society. Because when you look at what the government does and the bills that are put through, it's pushed by society being democratic. When you look at the what's the word? Toilets. When you look at the toilets in schools, schools don't decide, hey, you know what? We're going to change male and female toilets because we feel like it. No, they've changed it because society have said, hey, we have this identity thing, and society are pushing it. So the government can't ignore it, which means the government have to do something about it, and the schools then react to it. There's a perfect example that was discussed in a recent podcast episode. It was on the Growth Equation podcast. They talk about sports, but they talk about serious situations as well. And there was a school inside of a heavily conservative area, and they changed the toilet labels inside of the school because of what society was saying. Too many S's. They changed it because of what society was saying. The issue was where they were, where the school was located in the conservative area, they didn't understand it. And the parents went in uproar and said, "What are you doing? What are you talking about? This is a load of rubbish," because that's not what they believed. So the school was changing because of the society, not the government, not the teachers, not the students, society and what social media was saying. So the educational system that we have is built upon society and the way that we interact online. So blaming and moaning and arguing about the school system is, I'm going to direct it straight back at the person moaning. What are you doing to help that? If you're posting sensationalistic content that's moaning about the school system, you're actually harming the help.
Yeah.
You're doing a disservice. I would also make an argument that the study YouTubers are also doing a disservice. They weren't past tense, but the continued content of it now is, unless it directs people towards, skill development. Because if you teach people to play the game, what do they then do? They play the game better. Then what does the game need to do? Get stricter or evolve. So how is the game evolving? The exams are getting harder. The exams are getting more diverse. The exam boards are increasing. There are more levels and grades and numbers and letters that you can attach to people because people are getting better at playing the game. So don't play the game. How do we make action happen when we want more money? We strike. Why don't students strike and say, no, I'm not doing this assessment. No, I'm not doing these GCSEs. What is stopping them from doing that?
Society.
I mean, yeah, we can moan about society all we want, but let's look at practical things that we can do. If we take a school and say, right, the school is not going to do any standardized tests, would they still get a job? Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. There is this myth that if you get good grades, you get a job. It don't work like that. We know it don't work like that. So if we were to take a school, they don't do standardized testing. So their syllabus and their curriculum is not built and tailored towards standardized tests. What it's built towards is a development of experience and skills that they can develop for a job or for various jobs. That education is going to look drastically different. Do those people still get jobs? Do they still earn money when they leave school? That's a question we don't know because no one's done it, because everyone has to do standardized testing, to my knowledge anyway. Maybe it has done somewhere.
It's been done outside of the UK, hasn't it?
There's always been standardized tests.
No.
They've changed the way education works.
In Norway.
Yes. Yeah, there's like very few standardized tests, but there's still tests. So they've reduced it as much as possible. And when we look at the employment rates, their employment rates are higher. Their career trajectories are higher. A lot of people inside of like Finland, Estonia, those sorts of countries, they have much higher rates of entrepreneurship and business owners and people running their own thing and what I would class as being creative critical thinkers, because that's what the education system encourages, creative critical thinkers. So their grades are, this is an interesting conversation that I found out about inside of the phone ban research. Finland's grades are going down in relative to all the other countries. So their OECD ranking is going down, but their OECD ranking is going down because their reading and math and science scores are decreasing. Does that mean that the people are less educated? Not necessarily, because you're making a correlation between reading, math, English, science scores with education. If someone is not very good, i.e. dyslexic, at writing, but they use spell checker on tech, they use AI to help them with writing, They use video editing as the way that they explore ideas rather than through text. Does that mean they are less intellectual than someone that types up loads of words?
No.
No, it's through a different medium. So the OECD are not testing the medium that Finland in their education are pushing. Is that good or bad? We don't know because we don't have any numbers or stats on it. But my gut feeling, my intuitive interpretation is that those in Finland are moving forwards and they are being educated in the ways that the system doesn't currently enforce elsewhere.
Yeah.
So the testing system, the OECD test system, hasn't caught up with them yet. I would say they're in front of the curve.
Yeah, definitely.
But because they're so in front of the curve, they're actually dropping in ranking.
Oh, I hope that doesn't mean they'll stop.
Sorry?
I hope that doesn't mean they'll stop.
That's my worry, because Finland have been discussing a phone ban.
Oh.
Because they've seen phones relate to various issues and other countries are banning it. And the phone ban is obviously the conversation that I've written my Substack article that'll be coming out tomorrow. So that'll be last week for those listening, or maybe 2 weeks before. And I have a video coming out as well. Hopefully the video be out by the time that this podcast goes live. I'm editing it next week in my new editing style. Which was an experience of learning. We can go through that if you want. But yeah, phone bans is a serious, nuanced issue in education that I don't think people will talk about. It's much more exciting to say teachers don't teach this or school doesn't teach this.
Yeah.
I feel like this episode has just been me ranting.
No, I don't think so.
John, say some stuff for a couple of minutes so I can edit you into it.
All right, you want me to just say things and then you're going to try and slot me. Yes, I agree with this statement. That statement is incredibly true. I would say the thing that you said before also makes a lot of sense. But perhaps think about how you're wording this thing here. You're welcome.
Thanks, John. Really helpful.
Yeah. No, but it has given me a lot to think about as my two are heading into the next stage of education, as I am exceptionally worried for my son primarily.
I have a question for you. I was like, how do I get John involved in this conversation? Oh, you're now focused on your finger. Lovely. Good job you didn't have dirty nails.
I know, right?
When it comes to education, the system, learning, and policies, procedures, etc., and stuff that happens in a school, where do you, as a parent, learn about the stuff?
About the school itself?
About school, education, policies, like GCSEs, how people are graded. Like, if you weren't having conversations with me, how would you know that there are... Okay. I didn't even need to carry on. I wouldn't.
Yeah. That's I would love to say I would.
So did you know British Sign Language is going to be a GCSE in 2025?
Oh, I'm so glad it is. No.
So that article was published 5 months ago on the Department of Education blog. No one reads that shit.
Except for you, it seems.
Well, yeah, like the 2 people that liked it on Twitter. I was one of them. But yeah, I am in this. I am in the education. I'm in the research. So I'm familiar with so much that goes on. And I was listening to a Dr. Mike episode or video. And what he wanted to do was bring medical education to the public. And when I asked myself, education and information. Yeah, educate. I was going to say education, but that's education information. Where is it in the public? Yes, the Department of Education push about it, but it's not on social media. Teachers talk about it, but they talk about it in teacher forums. And sorry, teachers, this may sound offensive if you're listening. They suck at making it relatable and understandable to those that aren't in teaching, because they'll talk about, say, the Rosenstein's principle, or discovery of learning, or the games approach, or whatever. But if you're not familiar with the research, you just get lost with it.
Yeah.
And when parents go, "Oh, you're not teaching my son blah blah blah," well, yes, I am, but I'm teaching them through this, and that the parent just doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And the teacher doesn't have time most of the time to explain any of it, because their system and what they've been told to do. So
And parents don't have time to look it up. I've just gone onto the Department for Education's website, and I'm already just like, where the hell am I going to find anything? I want to find information about what's happening, and I cannot find it easily, quickly.
Yep.
I would actually have to really, really look for it.
It's literally a job. The video that I did about the UK education, I'm not even joking. I spent a week researching that, going through the different government websites. It was so painful, like so painful, which is why I've done the video.
Yeah, on like none of this information as I look on the Department of, like, I look at the educational hub. I look at this and I'm like, I don't care about this. None of this is information that, like, okay, cool, that one I might look at. But yeah.
Mate, so because that's what I'm thinking with the What I'm Learning channel, bringing education to the public, or the education science to the public, because it's what we talk about.
Yeah.
But I don't see where education and how education is actually taught, I don't see that discussed enough, because there are so many misconceptions and myths about education.
Learning styles.
Yes. Right.
Whenever I hear a poor teacher mention learning styles, I'm like,
do you have a resource that you're just like, have you watched this?
Yeah, I have a blog post that I shared with someone that's a Gem Pop blog post, which then link, and then I have a paper that I link to, the one that disproves it. Yeah.
The Veritassin video is the one that I link to the most.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'll do that.
Because obviously it's a 12-minute video, it's a popular video about it as well. So it's like, it's got the social credibility because it's a big channel. It's got loads of views, all that sort of stuff. Right, to the comment section. We've only got a couple of comments because there were only a couple of comments that I thought were not necessarily interesting, but worth commenting about.
Yes.
First one was about robots do what is programmed. They don't figure it out. This is about the AI takeover. And I love this comment from Davos because it relates directly with the next comment. So I'm going to sort of pair these together, which is action and perception are separate. And some people, we hesitate, we stop, but we don't really know why. We stop doing something, and then afterwards we recognize why we stopped to do the thing. Robots follow a script. They follow a program.
Yeah.
It's a great example of how we differ from humans. And Davos then does talk about the car example, the self-driving car example, moving forwards with that. It's just such an interesting way of looking at the world for me, and just changes the way that you view so many things that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you watched any content this week? I'm curious.
No.
Okay.
Sadly
Fair
not.
enough. Fair enough. You know, I was going to ask because when my Substack is turning into my process notes.
Yeah.
So as I'm going through content I'm consuming, I'm adding context, I'm writing about them as I did beforehand, but I just happen to be writing about them in a newsletter, Substack newsletter instead.
Do you update the Substack posts? So when you have a new bit of information or something new comes in, do you update your Substack post?
There's two questions in there. Do I update them? Yes. Because Substack's newsletters, it goes out as a newsletter. So I've deliberately tried not to update them. The second question is, how do you update a newsletter, article, Substack sort of thing like that? And what I think I'm going to do in the future, I think there's two ways to do this. One, have a new post, because these are somewhat finalized, have a new post linking back to the old post about what's new. So those that read the old post don't need to read the same things again, but it also links back to the old post for those that are new. How I'm going to spread those out, I'm not sure. I mean, the amount I'm writing and the amount I potentially see myself writing, this could become a daily thing.
Yeah, because I have seen your Substack go off and bleep, and I have a little peek every now and then when I get a few minutes to read it, because I know I want to actually be present with the content versus just scanning it.
Yeah, I feel like I may put a TLDR at the top of the newsletters if it comes to daily, because I consume a lot, I write a lot, I think a lot, and it's all about education.
Mm.
So yeah, who knows? Maybe it'll become a daily education newsletter about stuff that's happened. Are you familiar with the publish press newsletter from Colin and Samir?
I know of Colin and Samir, but I'm not subscribed to the published press.
Ah, every time I'm like, oh yeah, we could talk about this, you're like, nah, sorry.
Subscribe, I don't mind.
So their newsletter is essentially 3 highlights in a week about the creator industry, public press.
Yeah,
So
that's a pretty normal standard way of doing it.
I don't like the collected newsletters
Me either.
because I'm like, I don't want to know all 3 things. I'm like, just tell me a thing. Is that thing interesting? Oh, yes, it is. Let me read a little bit about it and maybe I'll save it for later. That's the way I prefer the newsletters. Like Seth Godin's one is perfect. So I'm subscribed to a lot of newsletters just for exposure to ideas, really. A lot of ideas are the same. I'm like, okay, I'm familiar, delete that. Okay, I'm familiar, delete that. Okay, oh, that's interesting. I'll highlight that one and then delete it. But the collections of lists is just not interesting to me. Don't know about you, but they're
No,
just not.
I that was one of the things that I was often told to start doing, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't want that. Like that bores me.
What I've been doing with the Substack, I don't know how familiar with you are with the writing, is I've been referencing the points that come up in my thinking.
Yeah.
So even though it's one story, it links to other things I've watched, read, written before.
Yeah.
So it's literally like a daily journal of writing about an idea.
Yeah. It's cool. It is cool. The bits I have seen, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, maybe that's the state of education moving forwards. Exposing knowledge, not making a Substack, but everyone exposing and sharing their knowledge for people to learn from. Because at the end of the day, as long as you can search for it, you can learn from it.
See, that's quite interesting. I like that.
Imagine a classroom of 25 kids writing writing an article a week about something they're learning about. Instead of it being a standardized test, them writing an article or doing a presentation or making a video about something they've learned about this week.
Cool.
So every week they're learning about something different. And what the teacher may do is say, okay, today's topic or this week's topic is 1990s history. Find something in the 1990s that's interesting to you, or find something in Victorian times that's interesting to you. Use Google, use Bing, use AI to find stuff out about it. Then as you go throughout the week, speak with other people about it. If they've got questions, move it forwards. And as you do presentations, you learn through doing presentations. Because obviously you're doing the presentation. So maybe like, oh, I like this idea. I'm going to move forward this idea. Friday, presentation day. Right? So let's do a little bit of mental maths in your head. So we've got 5 lessons a day. You've got 5 hours. Call it 5 hours of lesson time during the day. You've got 25 students. That's 5. So you've got 5 students presenting. So 10-minute presentation with 10 minutes to spare in the hour. Yeah. So you could do 5 presentations in one lesson with like a couple of minutes turnover time. So each student can do a 10-minute presentation, whether it's a video, 10-minute video, an article that they present, as in verbally present, or it can be a 10-minute conversation with someone, maybe the teacher or the classroom, about the topic that they've learned. And they do that every Friday. So they have 4 days to look at a topic and learn about something, explore something, and then present it to a class. I think that could be really cool, because the skills that people bitch and moan about that aren't in education, critical thinking, developing argument skills, etc., that would be there.
Kind of
Me-
making my I've just gone, oh, that'd be really cool. Because I am I am always learning.
Parent,
I am always learning. Huh?
parent.
Hi,
You're a parent.
I am. Hello.
You can do the presentation instead of making the school system do it. You can ask Aiden to do a presentation on things he's learning in his lessons. So say he's doing math, English, science, history, art, geography. You could ask him to do it, because you're not limited on time as much as the school are.
No.
You can say to him, okay, I want you to give me a presentation on this thing, and then we'll talk about it. Because then Aiden is teaching you about what he's learning.
Yeah.
And if you have questions, you can ask him questions.
Yeah.
And if you have an argument about something, have the argument about something. But then he's exploring the material that he's learning at school through a conversation with his parent, which is obviously more comfortable than talking in front of a load of kids at school that he doesn't necessarily know, or people that may bully, because obviously social environments. But he's exploring that material after school.
Yeah. I also was thinking about my own stuff, because I'm like, one of my biggest struggles, as we've discussed before, is creating content, because packaging, packaging, but a simple way, or a way that is as few restrictions as possible, is something like what I'm learning, like what you do with your YouTube channel. But I write quickly when I write. So the medium for me would be perhaps a Substack, perhaps Medium. Sorry. Because I would want to update it as well frequently. So I'm wondering whether Medium would actually be a better option for me, so I can update it without having to send up an update to everybody else.
Yeah, I see Substack more as a ongoing conversation with readers. When you look at a lot of the Substacks that are out there, it's ADHD, Jesse ADHD comes to mind, or is what I start thinking about, because his Substack is not articles. I wouldn't call them valuable in the sense that they give lots of information out that can be used for an educational purpose. It's much more him sharing his experience with interactions online. Hey, look, this is what I've experienced, or I experienced this in my day-to-day life. Do you experience this as well? I watched this video and I thought about this. What do you think? It's much more of a Substack ongoing conversation between him and his readers, rather than a, hey, I'm teaching you stuff.
Which is sort of what my email used to be.
Well, that's how I'm treating the Substack. It's, here's all the information that I've consumed, or here's a piece of information that I've consumed. Here's other sources that relate to the conversation that I'm having. The difference between what I'm writing and what Jesse writes, from my perspective, of course, is what I'm writing has academic literature in it, has stats, science, research in it, and it's less of a, hey, here's my thoughts, here's my opinion on this, and more, this is what the science is suggesting, these are the interpretations I get from this. But it's still my take, obviously. But that's what you can do on Substack. Whether it works or not, I don't know, but it's worth trying.
That's something that I'm quite interesting, because I am still learning stuff, just not necessarily stuff that would be sent in my email marketing, or sent in this and sent in that. It's almost like a learning journal, I suppose. learning experience journal.
Yeah,
I'm just
I think
like,
so.
that might be quite a cool way to get some reflection and do a bit of that, like that way. So that
Yeah,
always,
outwards.
yeah, yeah, the outwards. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. I love these
That,
conversations because I'm just like, and words. You know what I mean? Good. Oh yeah, we're still recording. Everyone else needs to know too.
yes. Yeah. It's
Got
funny that
it.
it's funny those sorts of interactions are the ones I have with my sister quite frequently because her ability to collect the appropriate word that she wants to use isn't always there. It's a skill
Mm,
that I've developed over time because of I think because of the worries that I had about being misunderstood.
yeah.
So I made sure I had accurate words to use. Words are also interesting to me as well, so I do have another interest.
Mm.
But she'll speak, and I'll have an interpretation of what I think she means, and then I'll just rephrase what she said and be like, yes. And that's part of motivational interviewing, which is an interesting concept as well.
Cool.
So I think that's enough for today. See you all next week.